Welcome to the Wine Education Institute's tasting tutorial. This is a palate calibration to get your palate honed in to the descriptors and the way that our own assessors will mark the scores for your WSET Level 3 tasting exam. Now, the tasting exam, you have 30 minutes to do 2 tasting notes, which is enough time, provided you know what you're doing and you're efficient and you proceed at a steady pace. Why do we do our own tasting calibration? Well, primarily it's because our assessors will mark the tasting portion of the exam. And we have found that WSET, while they are very persnickety and very precise across a great deal of theory, they tend to be a little bit vague when it comes to tasting. We have found that by palate calibration, we have dramatically increased the pass rate for our own students. This will give you the ability to determine when you taste a wine whether for instance, acidity is medium or medium plus, or the finish is medium to medium plus. One thing too is you do not need 55% on each tasting note to pass. You need a cumulative 55% across both tasting notes. So it's different than theory in that way. Now, what's going to happen is you're going to have 2 marks for appearance. You're going to have 7 marks for the nose, and 5 of those are actually descriptors. And on the palate, you will have 9 or 10 marks, depending on white or red, because of the tannin evaluation. And only 3 of those marks are descriptors on the palate. So one thing to know, if you find tertiary notes, secondary notes, make sure you include descriptors for those, because you may have 3 accurate primary palate characteristics, but if you don't have an accurate secondary and an accurate tertiary, you'll only get 1 point for that single accurate primary descriptor. Then you will also have the conclusion, which is 2 marks. Shown here is the SAT sheet, and by now you should have these precise indicators or components honed in and dialed in. Now we have chosen 2 very popular, as in easy to find wines for this tasting tutorial. 2 of the largest produced wines in the world, not for any quality reason or for anything else other than you should be able to find Kim Crawford Sauvignon Blanc and Kendall Jackson's Vintner's Reserve, quote unquote, Cabernet Sauvignon. All right, on appearance, I'm checking this. This wine is pale. There's very little color showing, just a touch of color at the heart there. Now looking at the cab, this wine here against a white sheet of paper is deep intensity. The color on this is ruby. You would be looking for more blue to see any purple. This is a ruby wine. Looking at the Sauv Blanc, this is lemon. All right, now the way we judge intensity is where we can pick up the wine on the nose between here and here. This is our light area. This is our pronounced area. If we can find a lot of the wine here, then it's pronounced. This is our medium plus. This at the end of our chin is our medium. This is our medium minus. This is light. This wine is a medium plus intensity wine. Again, looking at the cab, a little swirl to get the aromatics out. Nothing. We're here at medium. I can get components of the wine. Medium intensity. There is a vague here at medium plus, but this is medium. Leans towards medium from medium plus. It's just a little hair that I get from here. Just a little touch that I get here, not enough. It's more, it takes here before I can get more than a single component out of the wine. Here's medium. All right, and now I would like to do development at the same time that I do intensity. As you might imagine, there's no secondary or tertiary characteristics. A lot of green fruit. The Kim Crawford Sauvignon Blanc is youthful. Now the KJ Cab, there is some dried fruit. There's a little prune, a little not really earthy character. There's a little bit of pungency in here. You can definitely smell the oak. You've got a little bit of stewed fruit, dried fruit. We can call this wine developing. Now, whether or not it's going to develop into something good, it's trying to develop. So the Cab is developing. Sauv Blanc is youthful. All right, with the Kim Crawford Sauvignon Blanc, we have floral aromas of elderflower, almost a little honeysuckle blossom, which is always a good one to throw in there. Gooseberry, pear, green apple, and grapefruit. A little bit of apricot, pineapple, passion fruit, and maybe faint mango. Also, there's herbaceous notes. There's some grass, a little green bell pepper. I'd also do some sweet pea, not picking up any secondary characteristics or tertiary. One note in the exam conditions when you're doing aromas on the nose, it's often great to take a little break and do a reset your sniffer by just taking a deep breath from back of your hand or crook of your arm. You'll find that when you come back to the wine after doing that, you're able to pick up more descriptors and your nose is more sensitive again. Then for the Cab, a little rose, violet. Actually, we have some green bell pepper. We have some red fruit in here, little red cherry, plum, also black fruit, a little black currant, blackberry, black cherry. There's some prune in here, a little bit of kirsch, a little jamminess, and definitely some stewed fruits. There's a little leafiness to it. There's a little fennel, a little dill, and then I'm seeing cinnamon and cloves. I've got toast, I've got cedar, a little smoke, coconut, a little chocolate and walnut as well. There's also a little meaty character to it. And then moving into tertiaries, there's a little savory tobacco, cedar, and a little vegetal as well. I would encourage you when you are sitting your exam to have a container to spit into. Certain descriptors, certain evaluation like alcohol is always good if you can have a little bit consumed, but for most of these, the process of ejecting the wine from your mouth will aerate it and allow you to pick up different descriptors in the back of your nose and the back of your throat better than if you were to have swallowed the wine. So, as you can imagine, the Kim Crawford Sauv, dry. Now, when you do your tasting, at this stage, you should be able to hit multiples of these descriptors with every sip. And you should strategize, because it helps you get all the points, to hit your sweetness, acidity, tannin in one sip. And then to go through and hit your alcohol and body, finish, whatever it is. Get a specific amount of sips that it takes for you to evaluate the wine and knock those out. And if you keep in your mind that this sip is this, it helps you focus, and it also helps you to get all the points that are available and not skip. All right, now, with regard to acidity, what we do here is take a nice mouthful of wine, make sure it gets everywhere within our mouth, spit it out, tilt your head down, and then count how many seconds it takes before you have to close your mouth before your drool comes out. So, if you're at 1 second, right at 1 second, that is high acidity. If you're at a little over 2 seconds, that's your medium acidity. Somewhere in between 2 plus and 1 is your medium plus. Moving down to low acidity, meaning greater than 5 seconds before you have to close your mouth. Now, Sauvignon Blanc is a wonderful wine to use as a palate calibration because if you remember, we have flavor intensity as a marker too, as a descriptor too. And Sauvignon Blanc and acidity, Sauvignon Blanc shows intensity that doesn't always have to match the acidity. So that's why it's really good to get a physical reaction to your body telling you what the acidity is, regardless of how tangy or bright or how much of a punch this wine gives you. So, I'm going to do this with the Kim Crawford. Just over 2 seconds. I counted kind of fast there. I was really about just over 2.25 seconds. Believe it or not, that's medium acidity. Now, I've still got the punch, I've still got the intensity rattling around on my palate, but the acid response that my body's giving is not as high as that intensity would lead me to believe. Now, on the red, we'll use the exact same count to measure the acidity in reds as well. It was right about 3.5. So more than the 2 seconds, less than the 5 seconds, medium minus acid. While we're here, we'll also do the tannin evaluation. Tannin runs from high, being everywhere throughout your mouth, hard to speak, gluing your lips to your gums, to low tannin, where you have basically no indication of tannin at all, faint, a little bit of dryness or dustiness in your inside of your mouth. One thing to be sure to do when you're evaluating the tannin in a red is get it everywhere in your mouth, especially between your lips and your gums, where you can pick up the tannin effect on your body. So, again, the Kendall Jackson Cab for tannin. Tannin is present. You'll notice you're feeling a little bit of activation here. There's a little chewiness to it. This is a medium tannin wine, heading to medium minus, but the longer I sit here, I can feel a little bit more activation. It's a solid medium tannin. My lips are not sticking to my teeth. Present, but not overpowering. Now for alcohol, we measure, after tasting the wine, we measure where we feel the primary warmth of the alcohol in our body. If we don't feel it at all, then obviously it's low. If we feel breathing in and out, the alcohol being in this area, we're medium. In the chest, we're high. Now, one thing to note, while we are calibrating our palate, everybody's palate is a little bit different. And I mention this because with regard to alcohol, my personal palate, I'm very sensitive to alcohol. So most people's medium alcohol will be medium plus to high for me. I know that about my palate. I don't try to change the world. I adjust my evaluation to match the rest of the world. Conversely, with acidity, I happen to very much enjoy acidity. I can drink very high acid wines. A medium plus acidity to me is often a high acid for the rest of the world. I always have to double check because of calibration. I know that I can tolerate higher acid and enjoy it, so I usually mark it more towards the middle when it should be at the other end, and the same with alcohol. I'm sensitive to alcohol. I need to realize that about my palate and make adjustments when I score wines. All right, now when we're dealing with body, Audi has 5 choices as well, ranging from light to full. And what you need to think about here is water is light and cream to half and half to cream is full. In between is 2% milk, medium plus is full fat milk, and then the medium minus is your skim milk. So when we take the Kim Crawford Sauvignon Blanc for body, feels marginally thicker, weightier on my palate than water. That's a medium minus body. For the KJ Cab, that's about full fat milk, medium plus. It's a medium plus body. Now as far as alcohol, because I just did body, I'll do the alcohol too. The KJ Cab, I can feel the alcohol centered about here. I know from my palate that I should move it up just a little bit. It should be medium rather than high. Even though I'm responding to that wine with a medium plus, although there is no medium plus for alcohol, it's just the 3. I know my palate is being sensitive, my body's being sensitive. That's the medium. I'm going to put medium for alcohol on the KJ Cab. Now for the Kim Crawford Sauvignon Blanc, I'm feeling that alcohol pretty solidly right here. Knowing my palate, I'm sensitive to alcohol. It's still pretty close to the medium. I can still feel the heat when I exhale. It's not a low alcohol wine. It's a medium alcohol wine. Now with regard to flavor intensity, we don't have a secret for this mark. You just have to take into consideration the amount of descriptors that are happening here, a little bit of how long that finish is too, how long they stay together, and then also the punch to the palate. So with the Kim Crawford Chardonnay, it's definitely not a light intensity. It's bigger than medium intensity. It's a medium plus to possibly pronounced intensity. This might be a wine where we would take medium plus or pronounced. There's a lot, boom, hit you in the palate, a lot going on. The Kendall Jackson Chardonnay is a little bit more muted, clearly. It's a pretty solid medium on intensity. There's things going on. We got a few descriptors out of it, but there's not a liveliness, there's not a punch. It just is what it is. So it would be a medium intensity on the palate. Now with regard to the flavor characteristics, we're going to use all of the characteristics that we found on the aroma, lay them all out. The only thing that's a little bit different is we might add, I picked up a little bit of pear on the palate with the Kim Crawford Sauvignon Blanc, picked up a little bit of prune and coconut, although I think I had that on aromas, a little bit of coconut. Make sure I get those in there for those secondary characteristics for that wine. Now, with regard to the finish, especially as it relates back to intensity, finish is not how long you can taste the wine. Kim Crawford you can taste for 15 minutes. That's not the finish. What we're looking for is after we have laid out those descriptors, after we have found all those different characteristics on these two wines, how long are they present at the same time? You'll find that most wines will leave you with a single component that lingers. A little bit of tannin and that tangy acidity, intensity, grapefruit on the Sauv Blanc. So the way that we evaluate finish is a short finish is less than a second, moving into about a 3-second finish to medium, and then only 5 seconds gives us a long finish. And you say, oh my gosh, that's so quick, so tight. But I want you to do this. I want you to experience this. This is how long all of those little floral, all those other characteristics in that Sauv Blanc are together on your palate before that intensity and that acidity grapefruit flavor comes and wipes them off. So, I'm going to count. Right there, right at 2 seconds. It may even be less than 2 seconds. Boy, it's about 1.5 seconds. You can feel everything that's in this wine for barely over a second before, bam, that grapefruit comes and wipes it all out. This is a medium minus finish on this wine. Almost short. We're going to do the same thing with the Cab. Wow, right at 2 seconds, 2.5 seconds. That's actually medium minus finish as well. A hair longer, almost medium. It might be the case where we would take medium or medium minus for finish on this one. And for quality level, we are just not going to give you a poor or less quality wine. You're going to be dealing with acceptable, good, very good to outstanding. Now, when we look at balance, length, intensity, and complexity, the Blicks that you will start to use if you continue with WSET, that's a good thing to start to wrap your head around when you're making your quality level judgment. Both of these wines are definitely acceptable. They're decent representations of what you would expect out of this category. Acceptable often usually means that the components aren't, there's no harmony, there's no balance. The Kim Crawford Sauvignon Blanc, again, beyond any kind of, doesn't matter if you like the wine or you don't like the wine, you're evaluating the wine objectively according to the criteria that we have laid out here. We had a fair number of descriptors. Yes, there was a little intensity. Yes, it's a little unbalanced. That grapefruit just comes and just whacks you. But this wine is still a good wine. It is not a very good wine, and it is not an outstanding wine. It's a good wine and better than acceptable. It's closer to acceptable than very good, but it's still a solid good. Looking at the Kendall Jackson Cabernet Sauvignon, we have almost the same type of wine. When we look at balance, length, intensity, complexity, not a lot of complexity, not a lot of intensity. Fairly balanced, a little light on descriptors. Would have expected to have a little bit more dark fruit. Would have expected just to have a little bit more harmony in this wine. Is it acceptable? Is it good? It's between acceptable and good. I think it barely tips the needle into good. It's not very good. It's not outstanding. Doesn't matter if this is my favorite wine. Even if this is my favorite wine, if I objectively evaluate this wine, it's not a very good wine. The tannins are still a little bit rough, a little edgy. It doesn't quite work to the very good or outstanding level. Now, when you come to readiness to drink, you have basically 4 possible answers here. Too young, we're not going to give you a wine that's too young to drink, so you can pretty much mark that one off. We're not going to give you a wine that's too old either. So you're left with drink now and has potential to age, or drink now without potential to age. If you think back to our youthful characteristic of this one, the Kim Crawford Sauvignon Blanc, there is nothing that is going to mature in this wine over time. It doesn't have any secondary, it's not designed to age. This is drink now, not suitable for further aging. Now, we did have secondary and barely some tertiary on the cab. Now, whether or not you would age it or not, this wine is trying to be at least a little bit ageable. It's not going to improve a lot, but I imagine there would be a little bit of mellowing in the short term, 3 years, 5 years probably max. So this is a drink now with potential for aging for the Kim Crawford Cabernet Sauvignon. So we're also going to show you what your exam paper looks like. You're going to have a piece of scrap paper, so you can put your CICO, CIAD, or whatever your acronym is to remember all of those characteristics. As soon as we say go, you can write them down the edge of the page, or you can write them on your scrap paper. Sometimes it's nice to write them on your scrap paper so you have words that you can look through without having to put your wine over your exam paper, which we have seen plenty of spills onto the exam paper, so be careful with that. This is what the exam paper looks like. You'll see your different marks depending on the red versus white wine. Please make a note of which tasting note you are doing. This is a quick breakdown of the way the scores work, which is pretty easy, pretty self-explanatory really. As we mentioned, the marks for appearance, nose, palate, and conclusion. And I hope that helps you calibrate your palate if you can't be with us for an actual palate calibration session. And enjoy, best of luck on the exam, and we'll see you in diploma.